American PT boats weren't dying because they were slow. They were dying because they were loud. Japanese destroyers could hear them from miles away, until a quiet, grease-stained mechanic, not a commander, not a tactician, whispered an idea so insane that even Navy officers thought it meant suicide. In the early hours of November 30th, 1942, the waters of Iron Bottom Sound lay in near total darkness. Located between Guadalcanal, Savo Island, and Florida Island, this narrow body of water had already earned its grim name. In less than 6 months, more than 50 ships, American, Japanese, Australian, had been sunk here. Beneath the surface lay the broken steel of cruisers, destroyers, and transports. A silent graveyard marking one of the most intensely contested naval battlegrounds of the Pacific War. That night, the American patrol torpedo boat PT-109, part of Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 2, drifted slowly through the darkness. Its engines were shut down completely, an action almost unheard of in American PT boat doctrine at the time. PT boats were designed for speed. Their Packard engines produced a combined 4,500 horsepower, propelling the 80-foot wooden boats at more than 40 knots. Official Navy instructions emphasized constant motion during combat patrols. Mobility was considered the only reliable defense against radar, searchlights, and the heavier guns of Japanese destroyers. Stopping the engines meant surrendering that advantage. Yet on this night, the engines of PT-109 were silent. The decision reflected a desperate tactical gamble. Japanese destroyers, operating nightly supply runs known as the Tokyo Express, routinely moved through these waters at high speed. Their crews were experienced, disciplined, and supported by advanced hydrophone systems capable of detecting PT boat engines from several miles away. American commanders had already witnessed the consequences. Multiple PT boats destroyed before they could close to torpedo range. Their approach betrayed by the high-pitched roar of their engines reverberating through the water. The danger was immediate and lethal. Japanese destroyers carried 5-inch guns capable of shredding an unarmored wooden hull with a single direct hit. Even near misses created shockwaves strong enough to break ribs, fracture machinery, or throw men overboard. One miscalculation, a clattering tool, a knocked-over cartridge, even the faint mechanical sound of a half-engaged engine risked drawing the attention of a destroyer crew scanning the waters for American boats. With the engines dead, PT-109 drifted only on its remaining momentum, gliding soundlessly in the black water. The men aboard had no way to maneuver quickly. They could not accelerate, turn sharply, or retreat. Their survival depended entirely on remaining undetected. Any noise was a liability. Any ripple out of rhythm with the ocean's natural patterns risked revealing their position. The context surrounding this moment explains why it stood out so sharply against standard naval practice. American PT boat operations around Guadalcanal between August and December 1942 were defined by urgency. Japanese destroyers bringing troops and supplies were a strategic threat, and PT boats were one of the few American assets capable of intercepting them at night. Their crews were often young, many barely in their 20s, operating small wooden craft against steel warships more than 4 times their length. But their assigned role came with extreme risk. PT boats lacked radar during much of the Solomon Islands campaign. They relied on moonlight, phosphorescent wakes, and the reflections of distant gunfire to spot enemy ships. Destroyers, by contrast, were equipped with powerful searchlights, rapid-fire guns, and crews trained to engage small, fast targets. The silence of PT-109 on this particular night represented a direct challenge to this imbalance. Instead of racing toward their target, the crew drifted forward in near invisibility. In the darkness, the coastline was barely distinguishable. The only illumination came from faint starlight and the occasional distant reflection of surf against the rocks of Savo Island. This was a moment shaped by the tactical realities of the campaign. Every patrol carried the memory of boats previously lost hit before firing their torpedoes. Overwhelmed by ships they could neither outrun nor outgun. The risks of remaining still were great, but the risks of being heard were greater still. In the heart of Iron Bottom Sound, surrounded by wreckage from months of brutal fighting, PT-109 pressed forward in silence and an armored wooden craft, drifting through one of the most dangerous naval corridors of the Pacific War. One wrong sound, one misplaced vibration, and the 5-inch guns of a Japanese destroyer would end the patrol instantly. The night held no guarantees, only the fragile advantage offered by absolute silence. By late 1942, The Solomon Islands campaign had become a brutal contest fought largely after sunset. The waters surrounding Guadalcanal were narrow, cluttered with reefs, and dominated by night engagements. American forces, still adapting to the terrain and the swift tempo of Japanese operations, faced a navy that had decades of experience in nocturnal warfare. The Imperial Japanese Navy trained extensively in night maneuvers during the interwar period, and its destroyer crews were regarded as some of the best in the world at high-speed nighttime combat. Central to Japanese operations was a supply route that American forces later called the Tokyo Express. These were nightly destroyer runs delivering troops, ammunition, and rations to Japanese positions on Guadalcanal. Because transport ships were too slow and vulnerable, destroyers fast, well-armed, and maneuverable took over the role. They raced down the slot, the long narrow stretch of water between the Solomon Islands, unloaded under darkness, and withdrew before dawn. American forces struggled to intercept them. Radar was still limited, aircraft could not safely fly in such darkness, and larger American ships often arrived too late or too far from the enemy's path. This gap left a small and unlikely weapon to confront the Express, the patrol torpedo boat, or PT boat. These 80-foot wooden craft, powered by 3 Packard gasoline engines, were among the fastest vessels in the Allied Navy. Their design philosophy emphasized high speed as both offense and defense. PT boats would close distance rapidly, fire torpedoes, and accelerate away before the enemy could respond. But in iron bottom sound, speed became a liability. The roar of PT boat engines produced a distinct acoustic signature underwater. Japanese hydrophone operators, scanning the darkness with sensitive listening devices, could detect American PT boats several miles before visual contact. Once identified, destroyers opened fire with 5-inch guns, star shells, and rapid-fire secondary weapons. PT boats lacked armor. Even splintering fragments or shockwaves from near misses caused catastrophic damage. Several were destroyed before ever reaching firing position, their crews unable to close the gap between speed and survivability. Reports from the period described chaotic nighttime engagement, searchlights cutting across black water, tracer fire arching overhead, boats maneuvering sharply to avoid incoming shells. Survivors recounted explosions that enveloped the small wooden craft in flames, fueled by the gasoline powering the engines, clearing debris, searching for wounded crew members, and navigating in the dark created an environment where seconds determined survival. Families back home received telegrams that offered only brief summaries: lost at sea, missing in action, vessel destroyed. Dozens of PT boat crewmen were killed during these months, many without leaving behind detailed accounts. For the men still operating out of Tulagi and Guadalcanal, every patrol carried the memory of boats that had not returned. Night after night, American crews faced an enemy who dominated the darkness with superior detection, speed, and experience. In this environment, it became clear that speed alone could not overcome the advantages held by the Japanese destroyer force. Among the men assigned to PT boat squadrons in the Solomons was Robert "Bobby" Chen, a machinist's mate whose responsibilities centered on maintaining the Packard engines that powered the boats. Chen came from Oakland, California, where he had worked around motorcycles and small engines long before his naval service. His early skill with mechanical systems made him a valuable asset in a unit where engines were pushed to their limits on every patrol. Chen was not a tactical officer, and he did not hold command responsibilities. His role placed him inside the engine room, an enclosed, deafening environment dominated by heat, vibration, and constant mechanical demands. What distinguished him was an exceptional sensitivity to mechanical sound. Crewmates recalled that he could identify unusual vibrations or minor timing issues simply by listening, a skill sharpened from years of working around engines in civilian life. As the campaign progressed, the consequences of PT boat vulnerability became impossible to ignore. Chen and other mechanics often witnessed damaged boats returning with holes in their hulls, scorched paint, and injured crew members. Some boats did not return at all. Engagement reports consistently described the same pattern: Japanese destroyers detecting PT boats at long range, engaging them before they reached torpedo distance, and inflicting losses that mounted with each patrol. For Chen, the losses were personal. The deaths of fellow mechanics and torpedo men underscore the fragility of the wooden boats and the overwhelming advantage held by Japanese hydrophones. He became increasingly focused on understanding why detection occurred so early, instead of regarding engine noise merely as background machinery. He treated it as a measurable, tactical factor. His mechanical intuition allowed him to distinguish how sound traveled through the hull, how the engines resonated underwater, and how these vibrations might reveal a boat's position long before any visual sighting. This perspective set him apart. While officers concentrated on navigation, tactics, and coordination, Chen analyzed the engines as acoustic sources rather than propulsion systems. He began studying patterns in after-action reports, comparing distances at which boats were first detected with the throttle settings used during engagements. What emerged was a consistent conclusion. The very speed that PT boats relied upon made them loudly visible to enemy hydrophones. Chen's ability to listen to engines, not simply operate or repair them, placed him at the intersection of mechanical understanding and battlefield necessity. It was this attention to sound, rather than speed, that would eventually challenge long-standing naval doctrine and influence one of the most consequential tactical shifts in PT boat operations during the Solomon Islands campaign. The turning point in Chen's thinking emerged during a routine but essential repair beneath PT-109. While addressing a coolant leak on the boat's port engine, he entered the water to inspect the hull for cracks. PT boats in the Solomon Islands frequently sustained minor structural stresses from high-speed operations, grounding hazards, and repeated patrols, making underwater inspection necessary. Beneath the surface, Chen encountered an unexpected contrast. With the engines shut down, the underwater environment was calm. Natural sounds, currents brushing against the hull, distant surf, the faint metallic creak of anchor chains from nearby ships were clear and distinct. This stillness reflected how sound traveled cleanly and efficiently through seawater. Water, being denser than air, carries acoustic energy far more effectively. Low-frequency vibrations, in particular, can travel long distances without dissipating. When the engines were engaged at idle, however, that calm vanished the moment the Packard engines turned over. The underwater space filled with a heavy, resonant roar. Low-frequency emissions from the massive V-12 engines pulsed through the hull and radiated outward, even at idle. These vibrations were powerful enough to obscure natural ambient noise, and could be felt physically rather than merely heard. To Chen, it was clear that if he could sense the vibration so strongly at close range, Japanese hydrophones, large, specialized listening devices operated by trained crews, could detect the same signals at far greater distances. This observation changed the way he interpreted the after-action reports he had been studying. Boats were being detected long before visual contact, and the distances reported by Japanese destroyers matched the behavior of underwater acoustics, not surface visibility. The hydrophone advantage was significant. Japanese crews could establish bearing and approximate range simply by tracking the intensity and direction of engine noise. Chen began testing systematically. During maintenance runs, he alternated between observing engine noise at full throttle, mid-throttle, idle, and complete shutdown. Each trial reinforced the same conclusion. The only moment the boat became acoustically invisible was when the engines were completely off. No partial throttle setting produced the same silence. The realization was clear. In a battlefield where detection meant destruction, silence, not speed, offered the strongest chance of survival. Chen's conclusion challenged one of the core principles of American PT boat doctrine. The established belief emphasized mobility above all else. A stationary PT boat was considered a vulnerable target in nearly every tactical manual of the era. Yet the pattern of losses suggested that speed itself was making the boats detectable long before they could attack. When Chen raised the possibility of cutting engines during an approach, the reaction within the squadron was immediate skepticism. Officers viewed the idea as too dangerous to consider. A drifting PT boat had no maneuvering capability, no means of rapid escape, and no way to adjust position once committed to its course. In the confined, refined waters of Iron Bottom Sound, such limitations posed real hazards. Mechanics, too, expressed concern. Restarting the high-performance Packard engines required precise handling, especially under combat conditions. A failed restart could leave a boat adrift under enemy fire. To them, the idea presented an unacceptable mechanical risk during a moment when reliability was essential. Among the enlisted men, however, the losses of recent weeks weighed heavily. Repeated engagements had shown how quickly destroyers detected PT boats by sound alone. For many crews, the traditional strategy was proving insufficient against the realities of Japanese hydrophone capability. Chen's proposal seemed extreme, but the circumstances were extreme as well. Within the squadron, one of the few who encouraged Chen's line of thinking was a fellow mechanic named Morrison, who had also been deeply affected by the pattern of losses. His support was not based on technical certainty, but on recognition that conventional tactics were producing predictable, deadly outcomes. In the context of the narrative surrounding these events, Morrison's later death during a patrol underscored the urgency of the problem and the emotional weight behind reconsidering established doctrine. For Chen, the cumulative impact of dismissed warnings, mounting losses, and the death of those around him transformed his observations into a conviction. The idea he had, initially approached as a possibility, now stood out as a necessary alternative. Silence had proven to be the only condition under which the boats remained undetected. In a theater where detection meant destruction, adhering to speed-based tactics offered little hope of change. The notion of cutting engines remained controversial and counterintuitive, but the evidence before Chen was consistent. Every report, every damaged hull, and every missing crew pointed toward the same conclusion. If PT boats were to survive the nocturnal battles of Iron Bottom Sound, a different approach was required. Silence, however risky, offered that possibility. On the night of November 30th, 1942, the waters of Iron Bottom Sound were exceptionally dark. No moonlight broke through the thin cloud cover drifting across the Solomon Islands. PT-109 moved through this darkness with engines shut down, relying only on its remaining momentum. The decision to cut power marked a radical deviation from standard American naval practice. Against destroyers equipped with hydrophones and long-range guns, stopping the engines felt equivalent to forfeiting control. Yet the pattern of recent losses had made the alternative just as perilous. The boat drifted toward the expected track of the Japanese destroyer Takanami, one of the ships operating on the Tokyo Express route. The goal was to approach without acoustic detection. With the engines silent, the boat's interaction with the water changed. Every vibration, every creak in the hull, carried significance. Any unnatural sound risked revealing their approach. From the American perspective, the darkness offered both cover and uncertainty. The crew could not rely on radar. Their vision depended on faint contrasts in the night sky. The silhouette of a destroyer, if it appeared, would emerge only as a darker shape against the horizon. The stillness made the experience disorienting. PT boats were designed for speed, and drifting removed the element of control they relied upon. On the Japanese side, the hydrophone stations aboard Takanami remained active. Hydrophone operators routinely scanned for the distinct signatures of PT boat engines, high-frequency propeller noise, the rhythmic pulsing of multiple V12 engines, and the turbulence produced at speed. These acoustic markers often gave Japanese destroyer crews minutes of warning before visual contact. But on this night, the hydrophones captured only the ambient noise of the sea wave action, distant echoes, and the low rumble of the destroyer's own machinery. As PT-109 continued drifting, the distance closed unintentionally. The boat moved slowly, but steadily along the destroyer's projected path. The crew grew aware that they were within close range, only when a slight change in the air indicated proximity. The subtle hum of large turbines, the faint throb of a propeller pushing water at high speed. The destroyer was near, but without acoustic detection. Its crew remained unaware of the PT boat's presence. The decisive moment came when PT-109 reached a position suitable for torpedo launch. The stillness held long enough for the crew to prepare and fire their torpedoes. The weapons entered the water with minimal surface disturbance, a critical requirement for maintaining stealth. When the torpedoes struck, the impact was immediate and unmistakable. The destroyer absorbed the explosions before any of its operators understood how an enemy craft had closed the distance undetected. From the American perspective, the result represented an improbable outcome, a successful strike achieved not through speed, but through silence. This moment became the proof of concept behind a tactic that defied established doctrine, demonstrating that acoustic invisibility could succeed where speed had failed. The success of the silent approach created a shift in perception among the PT boat crews. Within days, the account circulated across nearby squadrons operating from Tulagi and Guadalcanal. Mechanics and officers alike sought to understand how a maneuver that contradicted years of training had produced results where conventional tactics had repeatedly fallen short. Chen, whose observations about engine noise had contributed to the tactic, began sharing his findings with other mechanics. His explanations focused on the acoustic properties of the Packard engines and the transmission of sound through water. Meetings were informal, conducted on docks, beside engine cradles, or during late-night maintenance periods. Mechanics gathered around chalk diagrams drawn on scrap boards or directly in the sand. These simple illustrations showed distances at which engines became detectable, how sound radiated through hull structures, and why shutting down entirely removed the acoustic profile. Skepticism persisted. Many crews worried about the mechanical risks of restarting engines under pressure. PT boats relied on rapid acceleration to escape after launching torpedoes. A delayed or failed restart could leave a boat exposed within gun range. Mechanics voiced concerns over starter durability, fuel-air mixtures, and the strain caused by abrupt shutdowns. Their questions reflected legitimate technical issues, given the demanding operating conditions of the Solomon Islands. Yet as more crews learned the details of the engagement, their focus shifted. The consistent pattern of losses under previous tactics had made the dangers of speed-based approaches unmistakable. Silence offered what traditional doctrine had not: unpredictability. Gradually, belief replaced hesitation. Mechanics worked together to refine shutdown and restart procedures, ensuring smoother transitions and reducing the risk of engine failure. Some crews practiced the sequence repeatedly at night to build confidence. Others documented the method informally, sharing handwritten notes with neighboring boats. The movement spread from necessity rather than formal command. Crews motivated by survival adopted the tactic voluntarily. Late-night briefings ended with quiet gestures, firm handshakes, nods of resolve as men accepted a method that challenged doctrine but offered a path to better odds. The silent approach, once dismissed as impractical, was transforming into a new operational standard, one taught not through official directives, but through shared experience and collective determination. The night of December 1st, 1942, marked a turning point in the Solomon Islands campaign. 8 American PT boats departed their positions with a single goal: intercept another Tokyo Express run entering Iron Bottom Sound. Intelligence reports indicated a formation of 6 Japanese destroyers moving at high speed, transporting men and supplies to Guadalcanal. These runs had become routine, carried out under darkness and protected by the destroyers' superior firepower, training, and detection systems. For the first time, multiple PT boats attempted an approach using silent running. The strategy relied on drifting into position, with engines completely shut down, minimizing acoustic emissions that might be detected by hydrophones aboard Japanese vessels. Each crew understood the risks involved. Without engine power, they could not maneuver quickly or evade detection. Yet, the recent success of a single silent approach had demonstrated the limitations of speed-based tactics in these waters. As the 8 PT boats advanced in near darkness, they aligned themselves at different intervals along the destroyer's projected path. The ocean around them remained unusually still, disrupted only by the faint swell of the incoming ships. Japanese captains aboard the destroyers were accustomed to early detection of PT boats. Through hydrophone stations, operators listened for the characteristic engine signature sharp, rhythmic noise patterns produced by the 3 Packard engines common to American PT craft. On this night, the hydrophones detected none of these familiar sounds. Instead, the system captured only ambient noise and the low vibrations of the destroyers themselves. When the PT boats reached their firing positions, the Japanese destroyers were still unaware of their proximity. At the coordinated moment, the American crews launched their torpedoes. 16 torpedoes entered the water in rapid succession, maintaining minimal surface disturbance as they propelled toward the destroyer formation. The strikes followed within seconds. One destroyer on the port side of the formation suffered a direct hit, triggering an explosion that illuminated the surrounding water. Additional hits followed across multiple ships. The suddenness of the attack created immediate confusion among Japanese crews. They activated searchlights and fired star shells, but the drifting PT boats remained outside the illuminated arcs, already restarting their engines and accelerating away into the darkness. For destroyers, sustained significant damage, with 2 reportedly sinking following internal explosions and progressive flooding. The remaining ships attempted counterfire but lacked visual or acoustic targets. Their weapons discharged into empty ocean. In the aftermath of the engagement, the PT boats returned without casualties. The operation marked one of the most effective uses of PT craft in the Solomon Islands, demonstrating that silence, not speed, offered the strongest tactical advantage against Hydrophone-equipped destroyers. The results of the December 1st engagement spread quickly through American naval units. In the Solomon Islands, word moved informally from mechanics to engine crews, from boat captains to squadron personnel. No official directive initiated the change. It grew from first-hand accounts, shared observations, and the visible evidence of a method that reversed the outcome of previous patrols. The shift reflected a practical truth understood by the crews who operated. Nightly in iron bottom sound, survival required adaptation. Silent running became a grassroots tactical innovation. Mechanics refined the shutdown and restart procedures, developing consistent routines that minimized mechanical strain. Crews practiced quiet approaches, learning the distances necessary to maintain drift speed while avoiding premature loss of momentum. Officers, initially skeptical, took interest as more boats reported successful engagements or avoided destruction during encounters that historically resulted in losses. On the Japanese side, confusion emerged in intelligence and after-action assessments. Reports described American craft approaching undetected, firing torpedoes, and withdrawing before hydrophones or searchlights could identify a target. Some destroyer captains referred to these attacks informally as encounters with ghost boats, emphasizing the absence of the familiar acoustic cues that traditionally signaled PT boat presence. Analysts attempted to explain the phenomenon by speculating about new American engines or mechanical modifications that reduced noise output. None of these assessments accounted for the deliberate shutdown of propulsion systems. As the tactic continued to spread, its operational impact became clear. Tokyo Express routes grew more hazardous. Destroyers tasked with nighttime supply missions faced increasing uncertainty about their safety in confined waters. The cumulative effect disrupted the efficiency of Japanese reinforcement efforts on Guadalcanal, contributing indirectly to the broader shift in momentum during the campaign. Silent running did not replace speed-based maneuvering entirely. PT boats still relied on rapid acceleration to escape after engagements, but combining quiet approaches with traditional tactics created a hybrid method that better matched the challenges posed by hydrophone-equipped destroyers. The tactical shift saved lives, reducing the number of PT boats lost during nighttime operations and improving the odds for crews confronting an experienced and well-equipped opponent. The adaptation illustrated how frontline innovation originating not from command-level strategy, but from mechanics, operators, and small unit experience could ripple outward to influence naval operations across the theater. After the war, Robert Bobby Chen returned to California and stepped back into a life that resembled the one he had left behind. He resumed work in small engine repair, eventually operating a modest motorcycle and automotive shop with family assistance. Customers remembered him as meticulous and soft-spoken, a mechanic who preferred to let his work speak for itself. He seldom discussed his wartime service, and when he did, he focused on the boats, not on his own role in their operations. Like many veterans of the Pacific, he carried the experience quietly. Over the following decades, the tactical shift he helped inspire cutting engines to reduce acoustic detection was gradually absorbed into the broader evolution of naval warfare. As technologies advanced, the principles behind acoustic stealth became central to submarine development and surface ship design. Navies around the world invested in quieter propulsion systems, sound-dampening materials, and hull forms that minimized acoustic signatures. Although these innovations emerged from complex research programs, the conceptual foundation remained the same. Survival favored silence. Chen's specific contribution went largely unrecognized for many years. The unconventional tactic had emerged informally, without official documentation that credited individuals for its origin. It was not until historians studying PT boat operations began interviewing surviving veterans and reviewing maintenance logs that Chen's involvement re-entered the historical record. His name appeared in technical notes referencing engine shutdown procedures and noise reduction recommendations, small fragments that pointed toward a much larger influence. Researchers who pieced together first-hand accounts noted that Chen's observations had aligned closely with later acoustic science. His practical understanding of how sound traveled through water, formed not in laboratories, but through daily experience in the engine room, had allowed him to recognize the vulnerability inherent in PT boat operations long before formal doctrine addressed it. The rediscovery of his role highlighted an enduring theme in military history. Transformative innovation often arises from individuals working far from command centers, guided not by authority, but by necessity and insight. Chen's wartime experience demonstrated that a single mechanic, attentive to the details others overlooked, could alter the course of frontline tactics. His story reflects a broader legacy, one in which the power of observation became a tool, as influential as speed or firepower. One mechanic noticed what everyone else ignored, and changed the war not with weapons, but with silence.